So welcome, friends and neighbors locally and globally. It's really a treat to be with Mary Collette Rogers. She's a real kindred spirit of mine. And we met in Boulder when Bauman College had a chef training program, and Mary's been out there. She's been a chef educator for some time. So I'm going to read her bio and then let Mary take it from there. She's got a new book coming out called The New Eating Culture, and I had the opportunity to read it and write a blurb for it. And I think it's spot on, because I think we've lost our culture and we've lost our values and we've lost our time and we've lost our minds and, good Lord. But coming back to really a wholesome lifestyle and good relationship with food is so great. And it's really so fun and engaging. So Mary's background is she was a corporate attorney who turned healthy eating advocate. She's worked in healthy eating field for over 30 years as a kitchen coach, speaker, healthy cooking instructor, and author. Beside two previous works, she's developed and presented several online courses. They're really good on meal planning, healthy convenience cooking, creating and cooking from a healthy pantry, and Kitchen Smart. That's her brand, Kitchen Smart Strategies. Mary's many on-the-ground experiences, both in client kitchens and the cooking classroom, have given her firsthand insights into the struggles and challenges faced by ordinary home cooks trying to implement a healthy diet. Witnessing these struggles has put her in a perfect position to offer and speak about the solutions in her upcoming book, A New Eating Culture. So I can't wait to hear about that. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Mary. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Ed and Megan. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for showing up and joining us today. One more piece of information about myself is that I'm a health information, what you might say, information junkie. Okay. And I'm guessing a lot of you are the same way. And yeah, the big kind of information I really love to get and process is health information. And so a couple nights ago, I was listening to a podcast on bone health, and I thought, well, okay, a few things about eating calcium. But as it turns out, actually, the speaker went into the amazing intricacies between our gut health, both upper and lower, and our bone health. And then she went into all the stuff about the different vitamin Ks that are out there. I had no idea. And after that talk, I got to thinking about all the different talks that I've been to over even just the last couple of months. There was one on nitric oxide, and I learned how the body produces that and keeps our blood vessels supple and our hearts happy. And about a month later, I went to one on mitochondria. And I mean, who knew that all throughout your body, you got these little tiny microscopic things that are doing amazing things. And then last week, as some of you might have mentioned, I was at the National Association of Nutrition Professionals and listened to a couple of the talks there. And one was on histamine, which didn't know there's all these different things that histamine has to do in the body, and it's got to be just in the right balance. And then there was a talk on depression, anxiety, and stress, a multi-omics approach. And I'm not even going to try to summarize that. All I know is that the speaker had slide after slide with these complicated chemical things that were going on to keep your mental health in good shape. And what I realized is that, there is two responses that you can have to all this information. And the first is panic and overwhelm. I mean, how can I study and understand all this and then be able to understand all the testing you should do and the supplementation and the remediation? And I think for most of us mere mortals, we probably don't need to worry about that. And it would be unproductive for us to go down that rabbit hole. But there's a second option. And what all this information inspires me, and what I hope it can inspire among all my readers and people in my community, is to be amazed and dazzled even. And when I encourage others to listen, I hope that it encourages them to really take a second and acknowledge and honor deep in our heart and our gut level how exquisitely wise the body is. It's way beyond what most of us can fathom. You know, hundreds of things all going on in perfect timing and perfect harmony. And so what does that mean for our talk today? Is that I hope that if we have that reverence for the exquisite wisdom in our body, it will also inspire us to ask, how can I help? And you know, there's only a couple simple things in the owner's manual that we need to pay attention to. Eat well, sleep well, move, relax. That's it. Pretty simple, right? But look at this one thing, this eating real whole foods. That's how we feed ourselves well. And the fact is the real whole foods don't generally come in handy microwavable packages. We have to do this thing called cooking with it. You know, cut the vegetables up, mix it with different things, put some seasoning in. But what do we hear again and again? Like Dr. B mentioned, I've been in the field for 30 years, and what I've heard again and again and again, I don't have time to cook. I'm too busy. I got more important things to do. And that's the number one most common barrier to making healthy meals. And, you know, it's sad to see how that story ends. I had a client named Clarissa, and she was quite overweight. And she would come to me every few months, wanting to know, could we get some more ideas to help her? And so we'd come up with some small steps. But, you know, I'd follow up in a couple of days, 3 days. Oh, no, I got too busy. You know, there was projects to get done and events to plan and the conferences to go to. And the sad thing is that the end story there was that the last 2 years of her life were miserable, in and out of hospitals, facing both cancer and diabetes. And so all of this is to say, get to the big why for this talk. And that is that maybe this time issue is really, really important. And I say that because everybody says it, but I'm not sure they understand the importance of what they're saying when they say, I don't have time. I don't have time to cook. We just toss that phrase off so casually and so all the time. It's just gotten to be an assumed, unquestioned assumption as part of our food lives. And so, oops, I'm missing a page. That's all right. I have to look at my notes. I'm not somebody who could just memorize talks. So that's what my point is of being here, is that maybe we need to stop and think about what we're saying when we say, I don't have time to cook. Because what we might be saying is I don't have time to keep myself healthy. I'm going to go ahead and settle for not having time and letting time rob me of the right to good meals and good health. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do today. Oh, and I can see my problem is somehow page 2 did not get in my notes. Oh, well, we'll just kind of have to wing it then. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. And that's the big why for this talk today, is that I think this issue of time, we really need to examine it. And then we need to see if we can find some solutions to get around it. So let me go ahead and share this screen. And there we go, is our welcome screen. And let me go on to the next thing. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is 3 different aspects of the time issue. The first is these 10 quick tips, and then 6 time management strategies, and 1 breakthrough mind shift. Now, let me tell you what the difference is between those 3. The first one is the 10 quick tips to get healthy meals on the table fast. And I was sure to include quick tips because that's what everybody's always asking me for. Mary, do you have any quick tips? And I understand we're busy. We don't have much time. So we want quick little things that we can do. And there's a lot of advantages to them because they're small and easy. We can put them into practice pretty easily, and they can have some positive benefits to get us going and give us some positive enthusiasm to get going. But here's the trade-off, is because they're real quick, sometimes their impact is somewhat limited. So it might move the needle a little bit, but if we're talking about long-term benefits, it doesn't move the needle a whole lot. And what this is all about, these 3 different levels, is getting into really moving that needle so we can really start changing the way that we eat. So that then brings me to level 2 that we'll talk about today too, the 6 time smart strategies to create a supportive meal making environment. And now these strategies take a little bit longer to implement, but that's an investment in your health. And the payoff is that the benefits that you get are much greater as well. It really starts moving the needle. We're getting up into that green zone. And then on level 3, and this is going to actually be next week, but we're going to talk about one breakthrough mind shift to break free of time crunch thinking. Because what I find, and we'll talk about this more later as we set up for next month's talk, is that we may need to move into a whole new direction in the way that we think about time. But that's kind of a bigger conversation. And yes, it's going to take a little bit of effort to get to that. But the payoff on that, the trade-off, is that we get a huge breakthrough that gets us free of this time barrier that seems to weigh on us so heavily. So with that, let's go ahead and we're going to get started on our 10 quick tips. And if any of you saw the marketing information that I put out on this, I call these permission-based meal-making tricks. And the reason for that is that so often cooking has a lot of baggage attached to it. It kind of comes with a reputation. And we think when we cook that, oh my goodness, things have got to come out a certain way. They've got to look a certain way. They've got to taste a certain way. It's got to be fancy. But I want you to know that, and I don't want you to think that if the quick tips that we're talking about, they're pretty simple. I don't want you to think that you're not a legitimate healthy cook if you take shortcuts and they use quick tips like this. So that's the permission granted in case you need a cooking authority to give you the permission to, yes, please go ahead and do things that are simple and make it easier on yourself to make those healthy meals you really want. And in fact, I might even say, ditch cooking altogether and just view yourself as a healthy meal maker. As long as you're putting together real whole foods that taste good to you, then your mission is accomplished. So with that, let's go on to quick tip number 1, which is to love your leftovers, but in creative ways. Now, some people, and the permission here is don't think you have to make something fresh every night. Now, some people just love leftovers like me. Some people not so high on leftovers, and I'm sorry about that because they are such a great time saver. But here's a thought that if you're not somebody who can just reheat them and eat them just fine, like I do, well, think about being able to use your leftovers in creative ways. And I gave you 5 ideas up there about you could add something to them, wrap them up in something, put them on top of something like a rice or a salad. You could mix them into a soup, a skillet, or a casserole. And you could top them with something else or put a sauce on top of them that's a little different than what you did the night before. And some examples down there is, let's say you made a simple miso soup, with just some tofu and green onions, the simplest one. Well, the next day that could morph into a hearty tofu vegetable noodle bowl. Or say you made a side dish of chard and sweet potatoes. You could beef that up with some black beans and chilies, and all of a sudden you've got a taco filling. You could stuff it into tacos or put it into burritos. And you might make a big batch of chilies, and that could the next night become chili-topped baked potatoes. So think about different ways you can use your leftovers without having to cook something fresh every day. So next quick tip is to get a jump start. In my newsletter yesterday that went out, I posed the question of, a lot of times we think, oh, I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to cook. Well, is it possibly true that maybe it's not so much that we lack time, but we lack something else? And maybe one of those something else's can be energy. And I know I've been out of town a couple of times over the last month, and I try to use everything up in the fridge so nothing goes bad. And so I come home, nothing's gone bad, but also I open the refrigerator and there's nothing there. And it's such a depressing thought. Like, I don't have anything to get me going. And so can I encourage you to think about having a batch prep day where you make these are some of my favorites, roasted squash or cauliflower, some cooked beans, some kind of grain or pasta that's cooked and ready, or baked potatoes or sweet potatoes. And then there's some ideas of things that you can make with those pre-baked things that get you started, get you over the motivation hurdle. Because I think that sometimes more than time, it's just motivation that we need to get going. So now on to quick tip number 3. Oh, there's just a quick picture of a jumpstart that I used just this week. Over on the left are some vegetables that I did the sheet pan roasting. We had a cool day. It was a great day to use the oven. And then over to the right is the grain bowl that I made with them. And I used millet in that because I'm trying to get away from quite so much rice. So there's an idea. And if you're on my newsletter list, you'll get the recipe for that coming up. So quick tip number 3 is welcome some help from healthy convenience foods. And Dr. B mentioned my book that's coming up. And one of the big themes is trying to help us transition away from the convenience processed foods that have taken over our food world and are very dangerous for our health. So as much as I'm in favor of that, I do have to hasten to add that there are some convenience foods that are still good. And so we can go ahead and use some of those. Of course, we would love to have our spouse and kids in the kitchen with us, but sometimes Amy's and Pacific Foods and Muir Glen, they can be helpful as well. So permission granted to use some things. You don't have to make everything from scratch. You can use convenience foods, and a few of them are actually healthy. The key is, though, you've got to check the ingredient listing and make sure that all of the ingredients in them are real whole foods. Food manufacturers are really good of putting all sorts of stuff in, slapping a healthy label on the cover or the front of the package, and you think, oh, that's a good thing. No, the only way to know for sure, read the ingredient listing. And so there's a number of different examples on this slide of all the different things that you can find at the store, if you're careful, that can help you make meals much more quickly. And now quick tip number 4, go bar hopping, but at the salad bar. And so the permission granted here is to have someone else do your vegetable chopping. And the reason I want to make sure to include this one is that vegetables, when we talk about it being hard to, have time to make meals, vegetables always probably come up first, top of mind right there, right? Because they've got to be washed and sliced and chopped and diced and whatever else. So the problem is, though, that eating more vegetables is one of the most important and valuable things that we can do to be able to become healthier eaters. So the salad bar is just a great option to be able to get all those vegetables chopped up for you. Trade-off is that they might not last as long in your fridge because once they're cut up, they deteriorate a little faster. And sometimes the quality is not quite as good as a freshly cut up vegetable. But in your handouts, and I meant to mention this sooner, don't feel like you have to take notes on all of this. All of this is in your handouts that Dr. B and and Megan will get out to you. But included in the handouts are going to be these 2 recipes, one for a salad bar stir fry with Asian curry option and some other sauce options, so that if you don't like leftovers, make it with a different topping the next night, a different sauce. The other one is a quick tortilla soup that's made with convenience option. And what these are doing is combining some convenience foods with some frozen foods, which is what we're going to talk about in just a second. In fact, I think it's our next our next quick tip, number 5, don't be bashful about frozen foods, especially vegetables. And so just like the salad bar gives you an opportunity to get vegetables without a lot of chopping, well, frozen vegetables are the same. And along with frozen vegetables, there's meats, tortillas, breads, all that kind of stuff. I focus, of course, on the vegetables because they're the most important thing. Now, the other thing, there are some real upsides to frozen vegetables. They're convenient. They're always available. They don't go bad on you. They're economical. They're nutritious. We know, I think everybody's got the message that they are as or more nutritious than fresh vegetables that have been shipped in from somewhere, and they've been sitting in the store, they've been sitting in the refrigerator. So they're nutritious and they've got all these advantages. The downside is that the quality is diminished. Freezing can diminish the texture and taste of the vegetables. But that just means you just need to use them strategically. Don't serve a side of frozen asparagus. You might want to mix it, chop it up, mix it into a stir fry, or I like them in my breakfast scramble, things like that. And so what I've done in this slide here, and you'll also see it in your handouts, is I've rated and listed the frozen vegetables, various ones, in order of how well they hold up. So to my thinking, the green beans are a lot better than mushrooms and asparagus. But that doesn't mean I don't use them. It's just like I say, I get strategic with it. 2 brands that I really like are Stallbush and Woodstock. Those are the best brands that I found, if you can find them. They're a little bit tough to find. And then think about trying to use things up within 6 to 12 months. I've gone much longer than that. Don't think you have to throw things out, but your quality will be a little bit better if you can use it up a little more quickly. And so there's lots of different things that you can make when you get into the frozen vegetables. And let's see, here in your handouts, what you're going to find is the recipe for Tuscan chickpea and spinach soup. And by the way, with convenience foods, healthy convenience foods, this recipe, and let's see, the next one, which is your basic vegetable curry. Those are basically recipes. All you have to do is dump some frozen foods and convenience foods in a pan, mix it up and let it cook. So you can't get much easier than that. So just remember that when we start, what we do is we start putting all these little quick tips together, and we find out that, we can get through meal making pretty easily without a lot of time. So tip number 6 now is find fast flavor boosters. We can have really simple meals, and if we'll just find a good flavor booster, it takes that meal from just ordinary to extraordinary. And this is really important. A lot of times if you're a newer cook or you're just really busy, you might not have the knowledge or the bandwidth to try to come up with some kind of spice mixture to make your dish taste good. So permission granted, let the pros help you. One great store is called Savory Spice Shop, and they're online. And I'm always using their spice blends to spice up and add pizzazz to my meals. And I listed a number of ones that are some of my favorites. And then there's also sausages, like the Sanjay brand is pretty darn good. I've checked their ingredients and they've usually been really good. And there's a whole number of other pretty good sauces and condiments that you can add to your dishes. And all of a sudden, just that quickly, you've got a really great tasting meal. Okay, so now let's go on to tip number 7. I'm going through these pretty quickly, and that's because I want to leave time at the end for questions. And so please, if you've got questions about any of these, I'm happy to answer them when we get to the end of the presentation. Just write them in the chat if you want, and then Dr. B will make sure that I get them at the end. So quick tip number 7 is master 5 basic dishes and then riff. Riff just means to play with them and add different things to them. You might try a different vegetable, you might try a different spice, that kind of thing. So there's so many different things that you can get good at. One of them is meatballs or patties. And if you know how to make a meatball, you know how to make a nut ball, you know how to make a squash patty, you know how to make a zucchini fritter, all of those things. How about a creamed soup? Learn one basic creamed soup recipe, and then you can make it with cabbage or broccoli or cauliflower or asparagus. Same goes for stir-fried veggies, stir-fried rice. You can put almost anything in those and have different sauces that you put on them. But you don't have to learn a whole new recipe because that can be tiresome and time consuming. So what we're going to do is just master 5 of those. And on that point, for all those people in attendance today, let's see if I can, there we go. See, you can see this quick flip that was created by a friend of mine, Eileen Fahy, a dietitian. And it is wonderful. It does exactly that. It gives you one basic recipe and then 5 ways to vary it so you can learn how to riff. And so of those people who are here today, we're going to raffle that up. I'll get your emails and we'll be able to find one person, one lucky person to get that and we'll mail it to you. Okay, so tip number 8, which is stay away from the grocery store. If you want to save time, you can waste a lot of it at the grocery store. And the reason is it's not the time at the grocery store necessarily, it's the sunk cost. And the sunk costs are the costs that the time it takes to drive to the store, find a parking spot, walk in, get through the checkout, get out to the car, load your groceries and come home. And that time investment is the same whether you're buying 5 items or 50. So lesson number 1 is please get used to shopping for more things than just 1 meal at a time or even 2 meals at a time. And permission granted to use a shopping service if you want. When I first started in this business, shopping services were really novel things. A lot of them went out of business. Nobody was using them. But now they've gotten so common. And I just want to make a special mention of one called Misfits Market. Misfits Market. Let me see if I can get that right. I've been real impressed with them. I haven't used them yet, but several people I know have. And I've been watching their weekly offerings. I think that's a pretty good option for people. So let me stop for a second and take a breath and a sip of water there. And then the next tip is quick tip number 9, focus on quick prep veggies. And there's probably a reason we use a lot of broccoli, because sometimes we really do. We don't always want frozen vegetables or from the salad bar. And so to the extent that we want fresh vegetables, the focus on some of them are a lot easier to cut up than others. And like I say, that's probably why we use a lot of broccoli and asparagus, because they're really, really easy. A couple others are bok choy, zucchini, yellow squash, and the cabbages, mushrooms even, some of them come sliced. And then there's also all those, don't forget about the pre-cut veggies in the produce aisle. Those are wonderful, wonderful time savers. And then our final tip is ignore the Kitchen Beautiful contest. I see ads and magazine articles all the time, and they picture these beautiful kitchens, and they've even got the beautiful flower arrangement on the counter. And so I think what that does is it creates in us an expectation of perfect kitchens that are all clean and nice and neat. But there's a saying that goes something like perfection is the enemy of, in this case, I'm saying it's the enemy of getting things done. If we're worried about some dirt on the floor, or the backsplash is a little bit dirty, or there's smudges on the fridge door, we're not going to get those meals made. So sometimes what we say is you've got permission to get new glasses that just don't see that. Maybe once a month, once a week, you can take time to clean up those things. But in the meantime, when we need to get meals on the table, we just need to learn to overlook that. So there's our 10 top tips. Lots of different ideas to get us going. And one woman wrote before class, she wrote about what she would benefit from if I would cover in the class. And this is what she said. She wanted ideas for simple food prep and simple recipes. And I think we delivered. If you look through that list, when you get your handouts and you look through that list, you're going to find a whole lot of ideas and quick recipes that you can utilize. But a bigger question is, are those ideas and recipes going to be enough to get that woman going and keep her on the healthy eating path? My suspicion is no. Probably not for her, and probably not for a lot of people. Now, is that a little bit crazy, a little bit negative here? I've presented all these wonderful quick tips that I just love, and then I'm going, but I don't think they're really going to work. Actually, they work. They absolutely work. I've been using these quick tips for years and years and years. And I wish they would work for everybody. But my experience shows that maybe they don't work for everybody, at least not long term. Like we said, they move the needle a little bit, but they don't move it enough to really change us at a deep level. And the reason I know this is that for my first, 4, 5, 6 years in the business, I would always give people recipes because that's what everybody asked for. Do you have some quick recipes, Mary? So I handed out dozens and dozens of recipes to people because I thought, well, really, if I just give people a healthy recipe, they'll make a healthy meal, right? Well, actually not. I would follow up and those recipes had disappeared either to the bottom of somebody's recipe heap or into the recycle bin. And so it got me thinking, well, what's missing? I thought if I just gave them a recipe, it would be enough, or give them a quick idea. Why isn't that enough? And the concept lies, or the answer lies in the concept that there's more to cooking than just cooking. And that's going to get us into the second level that we're going to talk about with those 6 time management strategies. Before I get to that, though, I'm going to stop my share here for a minute and just tell you a little bit about my background, because I didn't really get into this much of how did I get into this whole area. Well, and it was 32 years ago, and I had 2 very sick kids, 6-month-old, 2 years old. They were very sick. I was very sick. And we went to see a naturopath, which was quite unusual at that time. And basically, we were prescribed an allergen-free diet. And so we had to get rid of all gluten and all dairy. And so overnight, I had to make this enormous shift from a diet of pizza, PB&Js, quesadillas, mac and cheese, and then some canned green beans. We had to go to this gluten-free, dairy-free, vegetable-rich, whole and real food diet overnight. And here I was starting a software company, finishing my MBA. I had 2 little kids underfoot. And I'm supposed to do what? On a Friday night when all I'm going to do is order pizza instead, I've got to make a real whole food, vegetable rich meal. So you could say that I know a little bit about the time issue, but somehow by hook or crook, I was able to make this transition for at least a couple months and got us all healthy. But it was killing me. I look back at my kitchen and I just have to laugh at what a disaster it was. Speaking of recipes, I had an entire counter filled with recipes. I had dumped out all my recipes that I'd collected over the years, trying to find something that was wheat and dairy free. And there were precious few in this big mass of recipes all over my counter. I had pans that really belonged in the camping gear. And in a couple of years, that's where they went. A key missing item I had was a rice cooker, because we had to eat a lot of rice. And I didn't really know about something like a rice cooker. Instead, I had this microwave gadget that was supposed to cook brown rice. And instead, all it did was blow up most of the time, and rice was all over the kitchen. My spices, the things that I needed to spice up our food and make it interesting, were in little tiny bags with the name scrawled on it and all stuffed into one drawer. So good luck finding any of those. My grains, because we had to eat all the alternative grains, no more wheat. We had to be eating things like millet and buckwheat and quinoa. And those were all very new back then. So I had them all in these flimsy plastic bags with little labels, and they were stuffed up on a top shelf. Again, good luck trying to find the one that I needed. And then speaking of the pantry, it was filled with all this stuff that we couldn't eat anymore. And yet it was all stuffed in there with all the new stuff that we were eating on top of it. And you'd open the drawer, you'd open a cupboard, and things would crash out, of course. I'm sure you've all had experience with this kind of thing. And then speaking of shopping, every other day at 4 o'clock, along with all the other crazed moms and dads, I'd be wandering the store, foolishly thinking that divine inspiration would come and direct me to buy something that would be new and interesting for us. And then don't let me forget about the oatmeal, because I had this brilliant idea that I could have the kids out in the kitchen with me, keep them busy. I had this little play stove and sink. and some little pans that they could use. And then I got the bright idea that I'd give them some quick oatmeal. I dumped a whole boxes of Quaker quick oatmeal into that so that they could play cooking. Well, of course, the oatmeal went all over the floor. So here I was trying to cook all these meals while I'm slopping and slurshing through oatmeal all over my kitchen floor. So can I just say, it was a bit of a disaster. I don't know how I got through the first 2 months and got us all healthy, but I did. But it was clear that something had to give at that point. I could not envision going on and on with that kind of disaster. So what I did is I started thinking about my mother. Because my mom had 5 kids. She didn't have a fancy kitchen. She didn't have fancy equipment. She did have a very tight food budget, and she didn't have a car. We only had one car back then, and Dad had to always take it to the work. But my mother was able to get good meals on the table night after night after night, and we all experienced really good health. So what was she doing that I wasn't? And as I stopped and remembered what her system was, is she only went shopping once a week. That's all, that's it. She planned her meals every week, and then she stuck to her plan. And from her plan, she made a list that she took to the store so she knew exactly what to get. And in terms of recipes, did she have hundreds of cookbooks and thousands of recipes? No, I'm going to show you if you can see it. This is her old Betty Crocker cookbook, and I still have it, and I love it. I don't use any of the recipes from it, but it just brings back wonderful memories. And so that's what she had, a few good recipes that worked, and she'd throw in a new one every now and then. But for the most part, she wasn't sifting through hundreds and hundreds of recipes. Her cupboards and her drawers were very well organized. And by God, if you were a kid, you better make sure that if you were unloading the dishwasher, you better make sure you put things away in the right spot. Her spices were labeled and alphabetized, and that was one of the jobs that I got to do. I love it. I was around 10. I'd love to be able to organize all her spices. And she always had all the basic staples in her pantry. So basically what I realized is she was really organized. There was no racing from behind. If she was going to cook a roast, she had it out thawing because she knew she was going to cook it. If rice needed to be cooked, she started it in advance. Did she wonder all afternoon, oh my God, what am I going to make for dinner? No, she knew she had her meal plan. But it was clear that that's what I needed to do, right? That's the answer for me. But those were things that my mother did. And here I was, a liberated female. I wasn't going to be chained to the kitchen. But somehow I learned to swallow my pride because I was probably just in so much pain and so exhausted. And I said, I'm going to try this. And so I did. I started getting organized bit by bit, and miracles began to happen at that point. All of a sudden, I found out that I could do this. I could do it long term because I couldn't quit and go back and get us all sick again. I had to go forward, and this made it possible. And so let me see. I'm just trying to see if it's time to put up. No, I'm not going to put up my screen share yet. So the realization that came to me then, this is where I come back to that thought that there's more to cooking than just cooking. As important as the cooking, the chopping, the frying, all that. Yep, we see a lot of videos and cooking shows and all sorts of things on that. But more important than that is being prepared to cook, having a supportive cooking environment. And that explains why, for that woman who wanted some simple ideas and simple recipes, sure, I gave her lots of them, but it may not be enough to really move her needle. It's just too easy to get overwhelmed. So for me, I know I finally started doing things differently. I didn't wait till 5 o'clock to figure out what to make. I'd do it on the weekend when I had some mental bandwidth. I'd think of a couple things. I made just a little list. I put my spices and grains in containers. I became a Tupperware junkie and had Tupperware all over my whole kitchen, but I loved it. I cleaned out the gluten and dairy foods from my pantries, cleaned out the sprawl of recipes on my counter, and bit by bit, in fact, I did, was able again and again to be able to make the meals that I needed to be making for me and my family. So this gets us, and now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And this is where we come up with the second, let's see if I can get rid of that, the second level of strategies that we want to get into, those 6 time smart strategies. And there they are. You can see all the ones that I just mentioned. A meal inspiration center, you filter out your recipes, just get a few. Planning, being list smart. All of these are in my book called Take Control of Your Kitchen that walks you through all of this. And this gets into the question that I referenced earlier as well, is what if our problem isn't how much time we do or don't have, but how we're using the time that we have. Because we know that if we go about something in a disorganized fashion, we're going to waste a lot of time, not to mention cause ourselves a lot of stress. So as I thought about the things that I did, I organized them into these 6 areas. So it was something that's a little bit easier to grasp. And like I say, those are all in my book with step-by-step guidance and Take Control of Your Kitchen. A key factor to notice about all this, however, is that this getting prepared to cook part of the meal making process, it's 60% of the getting prepared to cook, or the meal making success equation. And so if it's 60% of the equation and you're not doing that, well, what do you think are your chances for success? And the fact is that most people have no idea that there's this whole part of cooking that we don't even have in place. So do you think this might explain why we have so much trouble getting meals on the table and why we go, wow, I just don't have time to cook. I don't know, I'm too busy. I can't get this done. Well, I grant that it looks like we don't have time. But partly is that because we're so disorganized and we're wasting time. We haven't set up a cooking environment that supports us. And this is really good news because it opens so many possibilities. Bit by bit, we can absolutely, following those 6 steps, when we put those 6 steps into place, and this doesn't have to be done all at once. It can be done little bit by little bit. Just plan a couple meals or clean out one drawer. Bit by bit, you can absolutely make healthy meal making doable. And you'll get that positive sense of reinforcement. You'll see those quick tips and goes, I can make those happen. It's a wonderful sense of mastery and empowerment. If you take control of your cooking, then you can take control of the meals you make and take control of your health. And this is where we really start moving that needle from the red zone to the yellow zone, and we get clear into that green zone. So action plan, let's see if we can get to it there, is can I challenge all of you to just give this a try? And the best place to start being time smart is by planning a couple meals. So I gave you this cute little handout here that you can do your meals, plan a couple meals, just a couple nights, and you'd be surprised that'll probably last you 2 or 3 nights, or 3 or 4 nights. And you don't have to use this form. Plan it on your iPhone, plan it on the back of an envelope, whatever works for you, but it's kind of cute. And then to make it easy, grab a couple of ideas from the quick tips that I gave you at the start of the beginning of this talk. And then make a little shopping list. You don't have to make a big one, just a little one. Make sure you get the right ingredients. And then the next day, just see if meal making doesn't go a whole lot easier for you. And you're more successful getting those healthy meals on the table like you really want. But in addition to this challenge, I want you to do something else. And that's notice if there's any friction. And now maybe into the chat, I know people like to do this. Put in the chat, does it make, yes or no, does it make perfect logical sense? I gave you these 6 steps. Can you see how if you did those, it sure would make meal making much more doable and much more time efficient? So yes or no in the chat, and I'll take a look at that with Dr. B when the time is over. But I'm guessing that you're going to say, yes, of course that makes sense. We use time management at the office. We use it planning vacations. We use it if we're going to do a home remodel. We use it all the time. the funny thing is we don't use it in the kitchen very much. And so I want you to be noticing as you plan a couple menus, do you feel like, oh, I don't really want to do this at all? Or maybe you do this and go, yeah, I'll do it once, but I'm not going to really do it. You can't see yourself doing it long term. Well, ask yourself, why is that? You use time management all the time. You have to-do lists. You like I say, you usually, if you're going to go on vacation, you don't just wander off somewhere. No, you think about where you want to go, what you want to see, where you want to stay. So we have these skills. The big question is, why don't we use them when it comes to meal making? And why I'm bringing up those questions, hope you think about them, is that sets us up for the next topic that we're going to be presenting next. Let's see if I'm getting it. Oh, okay, there we go. Next June 16th it is. And I thought I had a slide that had that date on it for you. Oh, there it is. June 16th, we're going to continue this conversation and look at that breakthrough mind shift that will get us, try to free us completely from this whole time crunch thinking. And so that's Friday, June 16th. Put that on your calendar. And we'll go into, why do we feel friction? How can we work around it? And then so that we can take advantage of not only the quick tips, but those 6 time management strategies. So we can, and we can really start moving the needle and getting over this time issue so that it doesn't rob us of the healthy meals that are the foundation for our healthy eating and are just our healthy lives. And on that, I want to leave with just 2 quick slides that food is central to health, and good health is central to a good life. So doesn't it make sense to examine how we've been blocked by time from accessing one of the central avenues for achieving a lifestyle of making and eating good meals? And then this one last quote I just love from Michael Pollan. We've almost been brainwashed into thinking of cooking as drudgery, something we don't have time for or something we don't have the skills for. We're being convinced that cooking, and then you have we're being, and I can't read that exactly because there we go. We're being daunted about cooking. And then you have the industry with marketing messages that are flattering our sense of busyness, implicitly telling us we don't have time to cook, or that you're a loser if you have time to cook. So I love that, that share, or that, excuse me, that slide. And with that, I've wrapped up levels 1 and level 2, and it looks like we still have time for questions, which I would love to hear people's input, feedback. And Dr. B, just first, did anybody respond to the question of whether it was pretty logical to use the 6 time management strategies to make meals more easier and more efficient?
Well, maybe not directly, but right now we're in this, like, let's all hang out together around the kitchen table time. And I'd love to hear from friends about how this touched their hearts and brought up memories, and also like, oh gosh, I kind of get why I don't cook. And then I'm starting to see where my issues are, and then how really, when you look at it logically, it's pretty straightforward.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
So like, I'd just love to hear from different people. And so
I saw that Mary did just say that it was extremely logical.
No, it's true. But emotion is what runs most people, not logic. So that's the nature of, life on the planet, is people are emotionally overwhelmed, and it's hard to deal with that. And it eats up a lot of bandwidth. But friends, just Lasita, share some of your lovely wisdom.
It's hard to imagine what it's like for people who aren't us. I mean, like, I'm 72. I've been cooking for over 50 years. And I use the ingredients from what I buy. I'm not working from things that are processed, and it's hard to think of people not doing that. So I found it actually very helpful that you were putting me into the mindset of the person who's challenged about this, and why they would be challenged. And I found that very helpful. So thank you.
Lucida, and thank you for bringing that up. And, you know, you're touching on the fact that this used to be just part of our common wisdom. This was part of what it meant to live in the world, is that you knew how to prepare meals. You knew how to feed yourself. And a funny thing happened. We're going to actually get into this next time. But a funny thing has happened over the last 7 decades in that we've been convinced that we shouldn't have to do this. We should just be able to eat processed foods. And so what you're noticing now is what happens after 6, 7 decades of people losing that common wisdom and younger generations not being raised with those common basic skills. And, you know, like my mom, her mother actually had to work during the Depression because she'd lost not one, but 2 husbands. And so my mom, so even my mom was not somebody who really learned to cook, you'd say, but just by living with her grandmother who had a pantry, who always knew a few meals that she could cook with their Depression era groceries, she had that ingrained sense that that's what we do in a kitchen. And so it is a very unfortunate thing that's happened in our modern world that we've lost a tremendous amount of skills and wisdom that would carry us through. And so I guess, and so you guess you're getting into, that's my mission, is that over the last 30 years, that's what I've taught, is the cooking skills, the kitchen skills, the time skills, and now the mindset skills that would help us reclaim our food culture. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
Who else would love to reflect and relate?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Madeline.
Hi, Mary.
Oh, hi, Madeline. How are you?
Thank you. So I've come across a couple families that are in the same boat as what you were talking about with your experience of like overnight. It was like all of a sudden they realized one of their kids couldn't have dairy and gluten, and, you know, starting with them having Chef Boyardee for lunch to like, how are they packing their own lunches now? And it's so overwhelming for them. That from your experience or even in your practice, like, have you found that going slowly with them, being like, let's just start with breakfast, or let's just start with wheat, let's just start with one item versus like a full makeover overnight? Do you think that's kind of just client by client, or did you find any words of wisdom there? Because for me, it just seems so overwhelming to them that I don't know how to start.
Oh, good point, Madeline. It's so heartbreaking. Again, going back, we've lost all the skills. I mean, if you had some skills to fall back on, it'd be a whole lot easier, but we don't have those. My first response to that is, how fast do they need to go? Like for me and my family, it was either, the naturopath had us taking my son off of antibiotics, and I had to, if I was going to do that, because they weren't helping anyway, he was still getting ear infections. If I was going to do that, I needed to have another backup plan in place. So we had to change overnight. And in some ways, I think that was, it's the cold turkey versus the gradual thing. In some ways, I think cold turkey is almost easier. You just do it, and you don't fuss about, well, okay, we'll have gluten for lunch, but not for dinner and everything. It's like, no, just go. And probably if I had to suggest one thing that they could do to make their life a little easier, start planning their meals. You just can't go to the kitchen at 5 o'clock or at noon or breakfast and expect that kind of meal to show up unless you've planned it. And if it helps at all, and for everybody's benefit, if it helps, I do have an online course. It's a 5-week online course that teaches people how to plan their menus. Because again, we lost that skill. I mean, people used to do that all the time. We lost it. And it's all gluten-free, dairy-free. And it has the recipes that goes along with it. And, so that could be a starting point for them. Another big thing that's going to have to happen is educating the kids so that they have buy-in and they realize they're part and parcel of this. Does that help get started?
Yeah, that does. And that's kind of the approach that I took anyhow.
Good.
And similarly, this is a totally separate person, but like, again, like a 25-year-old male that's never cooked for himself before. And he's like on his own, no mom, no girlfriend. And he's like, I don't even know where to start. And, I've never been in a grocery store, like pretty wild. But he had asked me for like a list of utensils, kitchen items that he would need to get started, like what pans to buy, like what, you know. And for me, it was such a slow integration of purchasing stuff that I was like, I don't think I have a list of just like what everyone should have in the kitchen. And so if you have that, that would be cool.
Yeah, and all of that is in my book called Take Control of Your Kitchen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's
Cool.
for both of them too. If they could take the time to go through that, it walks them through from a very baby level to more intermediate to more advanced. And you know, even if you do just the 5 first easy chapters, you're way ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game. So yeah. Yeah, and I've got copies of those available if anybody wants them. And Dr. B, maybe what I can do is pop in the I'll pop in the chat my website. So if anybody wants to see the meal planning one, the other class I have that can help both of those people could be how to cook healthy meals without really cooking. And that's using healthy convenience foods. And so both of those people, if they're really struggling, those are cooking classes, half-hour cooking classes. You're done with dinner at the end. And so that can be a really good way to just get their feet wet and get them a little confidence and comfort in the kitchen. So here's my website.
I'm going to make a comment while you put the website up, and you know,
Okay,
it's
go ahead.
helpful, and I encourage people to follow up with Mary and, you know,
Please
learn.
do. I'm happy to talk about any of this offline more.
I think the elephant in the room is loneliness. And, you know, people are really isolated and they don't have people to hang out with and to eat with and to cook with and to have family. Families fell apart a couple of generations ago. So what do we have? We have convenience food and television and the rest of it. So there's eating culture, you know, the new eating culture is not just having a cool kitchen and having cool ingredients and making cool meals all by yourself. It's like, you know, I live with a wife, we love to cook together, but when she's out of town, I roll a taco and I can be fine because, you know, I know how to eat. But this thing about family, and even once a week or every 2 weeks or something, and shared meal making that's the tribal way. So we are tribal animals that have been kind of beaten into God knows what, and become exhausted by the pace of life. So that's why it's really hard to get it together to cook. But we all can be a center of wellness. We all can invite friends to join in our home. Like even during the pandemic, I had people over for dinner on Friday nights. I had a couple of people over for dinner, and then we'd make food together and we'd hang out together. And maybe we would have mask or different distancing, but I didn't buy the whole mindset of you can't be, you know, engaged with people. So the Bauman Wellness community and the work that Mary does is so valuable, just as a way of people starting to find friends and come back to themselves and report on, hey, I actually made a pretty good meal, or even I blew it. You know, like Mother's Day, I made an apple pie for my wife and I put coconut on top and I put it too high up in the oven. So when I went to look at it, the coconut had browned out, it almost burned, you know, and I went, oh my gosh. And then I went, it doesn't matter. I'll fold it into the pie. I'll scrape off some of it. I'll put a little yogurt on top, and everybody thought it was fabulous. So I think the idea of I can't cook or my cooking fails, well, you know, even good cooks sometimes space out. But just the fun of creating things yourself and offering them up, you know, the fact that I made a pie for my wife, I certainly could have gone to the store or the bakery, but you know,
and those are really good points. And one of the aspects of a new culture that I emphasize is everybody cooks, you know, let's change this notion that, well, particularly women are all alone in the kitchen. No, you know, even if the kids are in there talking to you,
right.
And the spouse, you know, but let's get everybody in that kitchen, even if you're doing something small. That's absolutely got to happen. We don't want to be alone. And, you know, one of the things I do too is I talk to friends when I'm cooking. You know, get your friend on the phone, and both of you are making different recipes or maybe the same recipes, but that entertains me through a whole lot of vegetable chopping. so I'd love to hear anybody else that has any ideas about that or anything else. Go ahead, Dr. B.
I'm going to make a point that we've hit time on the talk.
Yeah.
And, you know, people want to say thank you and move on with their day, that's wonderful. And I did remind us that, you could give us a little survey and go, you liked it. And if you're not part of the Bauman Wellness community, I invite you to join. It's fun, it's interesting, it's non-commercial. And then if others want to stick around and chit chat and share and ask questions, we're good for a few minutes more. So it's all good.
And I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat that I
Yeah.
could answer.
If
Somebody
you would.
wanted to know about the speaker on bone health. It was Margie Bessinger.
Oh, yeah.
But there's the NANP for any of those who are on in the nutrition professionals group. I just saw that they've got a speaker on it this month too. I don't know his name though. His one guy was a prep cook in a restaurant. He says it's very exhausting in a restaurant, but much nicer at home. I couldn't agree more. Chopping veggies is relaxing and therapeutic. Absolutely, if I'm not rushed. And that is why we want to manage our time so we don't have to feel rushed all the time. Sometimes we do, but if we can manage our time so that we have the ability to do that without stress, it's so wonderful. Yeah. And there's more to cooking, just cooking. Yeah, her mom had the same, this is from somebody, my mom had the same style, very organized and time efficient. So good. And I love all of the different ones. And like I say, anybody who wants to have more commentary on anything, or if I can answer more questions, feel free to. I'm putting my email in as well. I put my website, MCR at look good. The New Kitchen. It's MCR at thenewkitchen.org. Those are my initials, Mary Collette Rogers at thenewkitchen.org, and that's my website. So I want to say thank you to everybody as well. It was great to have you.